What's good, people? I hope we're well. I hope we're well. So, I assume if you're on this video, you've seen part one. If you haven't, go watch that and make it back to this one. But a brief summary for the ones who have seen it. Part one was just about the underlying mechanism behind why we take insult to words. And a brief summary of what that mechanism is. Simply, it is simply the fact that we we see validity in the words with which they are using, which we are taking offense from, and we take a personal injury to those words. So yeah, that's part one. This is part two. So for part two, the foremost thing which makes someone a Karen and the human psychological aspect we are going into is an analogy. I'm gonna show it to you with an analogy. You know me. So imagine you're walking down the street. You're walking in a crowded, busy street. Say you're in Tokyo, because Tokyo is a very busy, crowded place most of the time. So it's an afternoon. You're walking and it's crowded and it's busy. It's very crowded. Everyone's basically shoulder to shoulder. That's how crowded it is. So you're walking down the street and you see a 6 foot tall woman. This 6 foot tall woman, she's got bright red hair and she's got the two circle tattoos on her arm. Now, if you know anything about circle tattoos, you know what that means and what type of person you are about to approach. So she's got those tattoos and she's walking towards you. You're walking, she walks past you, and because it's so crowded, you two bump into each other. You physically bump into each other. Now she gets mad, she gets angry, she starts shouting at you in Japanese. She's furious, like she's so angry. And then you're just confused. You're thinking in your head, it's a crowded street. Why are you so angry? And she's just screaming at you. And then she pulls out a razor, a 9-inch blade. She pulls it out and she's like, "Watch where you're going." Of course, she's speaking Japanese at first. She's all like, "Nani? Nande? Oi, gora." And she's just speaking Japanese and she's getting mad. And you're like, "Oh, you're like, why is this girl just put up a knife on me?" And then she realizes you're not from here. And she's like, "Oh, US foreigner. Oh, I'm crazy. I'm gang member. Watch where you're going." And she's getting mad. She's getting angry. And now, looking at that situation from the outside, is that a reasonable reaction to have to somebody who's bumped into you simply because you are both in a crowded street? No, of course it isn't, my friend. And that segues onto the next step to being a Karen. You have to be unreasonable. Now, as as you know of this channel, we always go deeper than the surface level. So why are people unreasonable? That's what this video is about. Why are people unreasonable? That's not a rhetorical question, by the way. I'm asking you guys, why do you think people are unreasonable? I'll give you a few seconds to think about why. I've got a few reasons. I think I know the primary reason as to why people are unreasonable. Okay, so the reason that people are unreasonable in 6 words is trauma. My friend, on this planet, on this earth, it is essentially impossible to make it without having at least some level of trauma. Everyone has trauma, of course, to varying degrees, and to the extent with which you have trauma is the extent to which you will be unreasonable and irrational and basically insane. You know, the way I see it, everyone on this earth has varying levels of mental illness. So the people who get put in an asylum, they are at the absolute pinnacle. Society said, "Nope, too much, you've got to go. You can't be out here, you're not safe, you're dangerous to everyone else." But just because you don't make it to that threshold of madness, that doesn't mean that your thinking is entirely rational, you know. So the underlying mechanism behind people who are unreasonable, people who are Karens, the underlying mechanism behind that is Trauma, my friend. Because really and truly, since all of us get trauma, just because your level of trauma is at a level where you can react rationally doesn't mean that other people haven't been raised in situations where they were always fighting for survival. If you're a fan of watching police chases, police cam footage, there are some crazy, crazy things happening on this earth. Absolutely insane things, which I don't even want to get into detail and ruin the mood. I want to keep high positive vibes, so I won't even get into it, but just know that there is an absolute madness happening on this earth right now. There are crazy people everywhere. And just because you've been raised in a way with which you can react rationally to external stimuli, you can judge situations fairly. If someone bumps into you on the street, for example, you're not going to crash out and whip out a 9-inch blade. That doesn't mean that everyone else is privy to the same privilege as yourself, my friend. So, to be a Karen, my friend, you have to be unreasonable. And the reason people are unreasonable is because of trauma. And so it's very important that we remember when we are speaking with people, when we are interacting, that not everyone has the same upbringing. Some people are raised in such a manner with which they are always in fight or flight, they are always taking offense, as I went over in my previous video, and they are always on the defensive. Because, like I said in part one, if you take injury to words, I mean, not if you take injury, if you take offense to words, it is because you took a personal injury to those words. You took an injury to those words, so you are reacting from a place of injury, from a defensive position. And similarly, my friend, if you are an unreasonable person, otherwise known as a full on Karen, you're acting crazy on the street, it's because you took a personal injury to an action. Of course, a sane person will realize that on a crowded street, it is essentially impossible to not bump into someone. And if and when someone bumps into you, it's there is no malice in their hearts. They didn't intend it in a harmful manner. So yeah, that's part two of how to be a Karen. Be unreasonable. And the reason that people are unreasonable is trauma. And I say this all the time on this channel. If you want to go far in life, you need to look deeply into your own psychology, your own upbringing, and learn to mitigate the traumatic and instinctive reactions you may have to stimuli, and learn to delve deeper into why you take offense to things specifically. But mostly just try and be more rational, try and be more logical. Don't react, because reacting is just coming from a place of trauma ultimately. And yeah, I want to keep this brief because it's a three-part series, but yes, for part two, how to be a Karen, make sure you're unreasonable. Make sure that if someone bumps into you, you're ready to to whip out your 9-inch blade. But yeah, jokes aside, that's part two. Stick around for part three, because part three is gonna go full circle. I'm gonna go back into the original point about how being an overthinker relates to all of this, the pros and the cons, the benefits and the deficits. So look forward to that video. I will see you in a bit.